Can our understanding of evolutionary history and biology teach us something about our health, our work, and our lifestyle?
We are so isolated from all of the signals that our bodies used to get because we don't live in our natural habitat.
What are we at our core? Actually, the misunderstanding we are nature.
Humans have this amazing innate ability to use our creativity to change the world around them. We still have hunter gatherer genes and hunter gatherer software, but the amazing thing about humans is that we can change our behavior in an instant. It just starts with one decision.
Welcome to Mindset, Mood, and Movement, a systemic approach to human behavior, performance, and well being. Can our understanding of evolutionary history and biology teach us something about our health, our work, and our lifestyle? I suspect it can, and I am delighted today to be joined by Jenny Powers, who's co-written a book with Luke Comer, and it's fascinating. It's called On the Origin of Being. And I mean, it speaks to Darwin, right? It speaks to our origin story. It's so much in there. I'm delighted to have Jenny in conversation with me today. Her book's amazing. I've had the fortune of reading it in advance of it being in sale, so we'll leave details on that in the show notes for you afterwards. But let's welcome Jenny. How are you doing today, Jenny?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm so glad that our book spoke to you.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. So regular listeners of my show may know, new listeners, I'm really interested in human performance, and I'll expand that. So human performance is how do we function best? So we got the workspace, parenting as a human being, in fitness, all domains of life, thriving and flourishing. I don't know about you, but in today's world, there's a lot of pressures, societal pressures, money pressures, culture pressures. So there's a lot of challenges. And things aren't going so well for the human condition right now. And it does seem to me the more we get our wonderful brains and people connected around this topic, the more we can solve some of these challenges and reorient around to a better health and life. So, Jenny, you've written this beautiful book. It's a very science-led book. So there's a lot of facts in there. But I'm curious, let's just start with, how did you get to writing a book on the origin of being? What got you into this?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. I have a PhD in immunology, which is I'm a bench scientist studying the immune system. But then I had kids and I left academia because I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And I'd always had this dream of being an author. And so I was able to, kind of get off the academic path and pursue this dream. I actually write middle grade fiction, which is totally different. but but during this whole time, like during grad school and postdoc and the early years with my kids, I felt like there was just a disconnect somewhere. It wasn't, I had depression and I wasn't in the right headspace or the right health space. Things around the world were really starting to bother me. And then, writers don't really make much money. So I was looking for a little part-time job that I could do so I could still have the flexibility to be with my kids. And I found Luke on he had an advertisement for a nutritionist or someone who'd help him with his nutrition book. And I'm like, oh, well, I can totally do that. And so when I called him and we had our interview, the first thing out of his mouth was, oh, I already hired a nutritionist to help me. And I was like, oh, man, I was really upset. I'm like, well, thanks for taking my call anyway. But he said, but I have this idea that's been, since I started my health journey, his nutritional health journey and what got him into really getting into nutrition. So he explained to me this concept of our evolutionary mismatch that, our modern world changed so quickly and at such a rapid pace that our genetics and our bodies and the way that we can maintain homeostasis there's a total mismatch because we didn't evolve in the conditions that we live in now. And that, he was listing all the ways of life that is affected by this kind of mismatch. And I'm starting to think to myself, whoa, this really felt like an alignment of what I had been feeling. And so when he asked me if I was interested in researching and writing a book about this, it felt like it was meant to be because I have a scientific background and I want to be a writer. And so those things dovetailed together so nicely. And I started this project kind of he had things, a vision of his mind and the scaffolding and kind of the way he wanted to look at things. But I kind of started this project as with a blank sheet of paper. And I learned everything along the way. And it really, it changed the trajectory of my life. So I was very grateful to have this opportunity. And I can't believe, it took 3 years to write the book. And then there was COVID. And then it's taken another year and a half to kind of get to this point. And it's just amazing to think that it's out there now.
Cool. Well, what a beautiful journey. What a lovely summary. It's curious how that serendipitous moment landed for you. And curious that obviously what Luke was looking at, on some level, you were looking at around health and lifestyle and your own experience. And I'm curious. So we hear a lot, right? In fact, there's a swamp of knowledge out there. There's amazing thought leaders around, and there are some dubious sites of places of knowledge. But the fundamentals of human health, they seem to be fairly common, don't they? Physical health, emotional health, mental health, social health. And I would layer in environmental health, because these are all interrelating factors. Some of my work's taken me into the fields of understanding fractal dynamics, which are repeating patterns which we see in nature. And I see them in the psychological realm. A small belief pattern in one person's experience plays out in their team and their company or their family, and we see it in culture. So these fractal patterns are natural. They're natural systems. And so are the ways that we function. And yet, as you've alluded to, the last couple of 100 years has been such a curve of change since the Industrial Revolution. The world is a different thing now, and we've shaped that world. Us humans, we're really clever. And you wrote about it in your book, how we've actually not changed our DNA, but we've changed our environment because we're very, very intelligent. But at what cost is a question I'm very curious in. And here's the other thing. I know I'm going to dive straight in, but we can't go back. It's one of these things where we just can't go back. And we're hankering for a past life. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it's a very different world, a lot less cars around, all sorts of different things. You can't go back. So there's something around that we need to take ownership of. What can we do going forward? And I think that's an interesting, an empowering state to come from. Now, I've read so many pieces of your book. Big one I sort of went straight to was sleep. Really interesting. That was like one of your opening sections around sleep. Now, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, everybody needs to sleep. The cat needs to sleep. The dog needs, well, we all need to sleep. And yet sleep is sometimes underrated, and it's not given the respect and the requirements needed. What's your experience of not only doing the research on sleep, but your experience of doing the research and applying it for yourself?
Yeah, well, it was fascinating because everyone, hears sleep hygiene and different and blue light and all of these reasons, ways that you could get better sleep, but I never really understood like the reason why. Like, why is it blue light and why does temperature matter and all of these things? And so kind of starting at the beginning, starting in single cell life organisms, the very first life on Earth responded to cycles of light and dark because the Earth rotated, and it still does, thankfully. But even those single cells had to figure out and evolve into when the best times were to do certain tasks. For instance, when the cyanobacteria was at the surface of the ocean getting sunlight, they didn't want to undergo cell division because that's closer, you might get some UV damage to your DNA while you do it. So they evolved to do their cell division at night when they go back down to the bottom. Not to the bottom, but they sink lower. At night too, that is where all the nutrients were for them to like kind of soak it in. And then, they knew, all right, the sun's coming up. We're going to go flip back to the top and do our thing. And the reason why it was blue light was because it's the wavelength of light that penetrated the oceans. And that just kind of blew my mind. We could be attuned to any kind of light, but it's because we evolved from the oceans. And then knowing, starting from that very, very first life, there are mechanisms and genes in all cells and all animals and even humans that kind of respond to this pattern of light and dark. And these are the circadian rhythms. And one thing that was really interesting was it's not necessarily, when I started this research, I'm like, oh, our ancestors probably got like 8-10 hours of sleep. And, but when I was going into the research, they really did not sleep as much as we expected them to sleep. And plus, if you think about it, they often sleep on the ground, on their arms, not, you're not picturing this really nice, comfortable bed. But they didn't even have a word for insomnia. It wasn't part of their vocabulary, and it's because they lived and their bodies were in our natural environment and responded to sunlight and dark. That cycle of sunlight and darkness, and their circadian rhythms are so attuned to that of the earth that they get really bright sunlight in the morning, and that triggers a series of hormonal changes in your body. And then as the sun went down, after it goes down, there's no light, and that triggers hormonal changes in your body. But modern humans, we don't have that spike in the morning and then that gentle go off. So we kind of have a twilight existence where we maybe get a fraction of the light that we would get from sunlight, but we get it all day long. And then here's the sun went down here, but we're still getting blue light. And so the natural rhythms of melatonin and cortisol, your hypothalamus just does all kinds of things. We're not getting those entrained in, or the signals aren't entrained in sync with the earth. So it's no wonder that we can't fall asleep, and it's no wonder that we can't get up, because we are so isolated from all of the signals that our bodies used to get because we don't live in our natural habitat. So something that I really started to do, and it made a huge difference, is it's nice because I have dogs. They need to be walked. And so I love walking them every morning. And we live in beautiful, sunny Colorado. And so we get lots of sunlight. And I think that really helps me start my day off, helps me wake up. And then in the evenings, I'm really just cognizant of the light sources around me. I have all of my devices set to go to night shift where it blocks the blue light. I have blue blocking glasses that I use sometimes. I turn down the light. And it's hard, but I really try not, maybe an hour before bedtime, not to have a screen. I try to read a book or listen to music or listen to a podcast. And I really do feel the difference. And I just, having young kids, you're tired all the time. But now that they're even older, I still just feel tired all the time. And so kind of changing just that one habit really, really made a big difference in my life.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've done a lot of studying this myself for my own health reasons and for the work I do around performance. And one thing I put into my own way of being is I don't have an alarm clock. I mean, I don't like being told what to do anyway, so I don't want an alarm clock to tell me what to do. But that jokes aside, it's like I don't want to be disrupted, because how does my cognitive sense of I need to get up at 6 a.m. know better than my body, what its repair rate? I do a lot of physical training, so there's different rates of repair in the body. And I found that I wake with the light. Now, the curious thing, I've been doing this for a good, maybe 5-6 years continuously like this. I wake up at this, so it's 4:30 in the morning, gets light in the UK now, and I'm up. I can be up at 4:30. I'm good to go. I may nap in the some PM, like for about 30 minutes. Not always, just sometimes, because I give myself permission, because that's to do with health.
And then you're listening to your body, what your body needs. Mm-hmm.
And I go to bed, so it lights out at 10, almost methodically every night. And I found that the rhythm has created more balance in my system. So I have an autoimmune condition which I have to manage, and that autoimmune condition, by some medical sources and leading thinkers, would say it is a circadian rhythm issue as well as a autoimmune issue. So there's some really interesting things. But you're right, aren't you? Our designed culture of, say, screen-based, lights on, that goes against the absolute myriad of millennia of training that the brains had and the retinas had for the light sources. But as a simple takeaway, it seems to be wake up with the light, get outdoors. I know Andrew Huberman talks about this. Many people speak about this. The research is out there. Get out, get in daylight, first hour. Let that cortisol pulse come online by natural daylight. You don't have to take anything. You don't even need coffee. You need light. And I think it's such an interesting first thing that I found. It sounds like your research has shown. Be with the light. Let the light drive your patterns. And it's the most fundamental starting place, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's the thing that started, billions of years ago with the rotation of the earth. I mean, that is just the natural It's the niche that we found as diurnal mammals, and yeah, like you said, over millennia, and it's only been in the last, since we got electricity that we haven't been following this. And so it's only what, 200 years, maybe a little bit longer. And so there's no way that our bodies have had a chance to evolve genetically to be able to adapt to this new light environment that we have. So we're going to have pathology because our light environment is different. And I don't think people realize how important light is. It kind of is, it's the timekeeper. It really helps our bodies just know what to do and when to do it. And so we have to listen to those. Our bodies are constantly sending us signals about what it needs. Like you said, you take a nap every day, or not every day, but when you need it. We have this homeostatic drive to get enough sleep, but we don't pay it. We stay up because we have to work. We stay up because we want to be entertained. We don't take a nap because we have too much to do. It's almost as if we don't have time to sleep. And it's counterintuitive, like, oh, if I stay up, I'll be more productive. But there's so many studies in our work chapter. We talk a lot about, at a certain point, your productivity goes down so much, your ability to perform. And you might be thinking that you're getting a lot more done, but if you just rested and slept and started again fresh in the morning, you'd be 10 times more productive. So I really think that people just need to know. And this is, all the sections of our book are intertwined, because not only are you getting outside for sunlight, but you're getting outside to be in nature. There's something about nature that really relaxes your body. Decreases your cortisol level and it decreases the stress response. So imagine like all of these things going on. You get outside, you get your sunlight, you get exposure to nature, and then you start your day. And you're just in a so much better place to start your day. You're more in equilibrium with yourself. You're more in equilibrium with the world around you, and hopefully better able to handle the ups and downs. Our evolution, designed us to be able to maintain this homeostasis. It's not, oh, we're going to be this perfect all the time. It's the ability to come back to our equilibrium when we've been, for any reason, if we're sick or injured or there's a storm, or, whenever we're faced with any kind of adversity, if we take care of our bodies know instinctively how to get back to that equilibrium. So we need to listen, and we need to give our bodies a chance to, first of all, reach this healthy equilibrium, and then give it the chance to do the things that it naturally knows how to do, heal, sleep, all these things, so we can return to equilibrium much quicker if we get knocked off.
Such beautifully said, wise words. It's curious, isn't it? We've gone so much into a conceptual world now, and there are all sorts of reasons, and it's a very long conversation. But if someone gets ill now, it's like, oh, just take this, they take this pill so you can carry on working. You got this problem, just band-aid that. It's like, okay, is this an intelligent idea? Who does this serve? And that's a question I deliver in all my coaching. When we're asking about something, whose choice is this? Whose choice is it to work through, I don't feel good? Is that your choice? Is it culture's choice? Is it the ad you saw on TV for some medicine's choice? You better ask yourself, whose choice is this? It's a powerful question. We don't stop to think. But you're right. So I can't remember the doctor who wrote the book about the inflamed mind. His name will come to me. He was very interested in how inflammation in the body then created a emotional neurological state, such as depression, anxiety. And he is alluding to a story around, he had a tooth extraction, something like that, and he felt very, very low. Only recently, I got a slight injury when I was training, and I was really low. And I'm thankful I'm very self-aware, and thanks to yoga, I've become very embodied. But my mood was very, very low. Well, you could call it depression if you want to, but technically it's the neural state of shutdown or retreat, neurologically, parasympathetic retreat. Because my body was damaged. I had some tissue damage, I had a tear, it needed to heal. But if we put on I won't use a brand name, but a product on your skin to make the feeling go away and medicate it, are you doing right by your body and healing and having the right homeostatic balance? Or are you disrupting the system and causing long-term problems? I was so intrigued looking at your research around the disease culture, the chronic disease culture, which, if you haven't heard about it, it's everywhere. The modern lifestyle and modern diseases, they're diseases of is it non-communicable?
And non-communicable diseases, the diseases of modernity. Yeah. The things like diabetes and heart disease and obesity, cancer, hypertension, all kinds of things. And also, depression is, you said that, our bodies go into this state when we're injured to retreat, but people are constantly in that retreat. They get caught up in this cycle and they never are able to get back to equilibrium. And so 90% of the reasons why people go to the doctor today, they're going to see the doctor for something we never used to suffer from. And it's these non-communicable diseases that are really we have all this science and technology and medicine, like you said, pills and stuff to keep us alive, but to keep us alive, but what's our quality of life? We may have 78 years old is our lifespan, average lifespan, but how many of those are good years? I think in our book, I think it's something around 62 years of good, healthy life. Yeah. 62, 63 years of healthy life. That's our average healthy life. And then 15 years later, that's when our lifespan, your average lifespan, but those 15 years where what is your quality of life like? So I think people have this misconception like, oh, we can live forever, but you need to think about how you want to live. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday and people are like, oh man, why? I don't want to live till I'm 100. Me sitting in a nursing home, not being able to remember my own name and have, diabetes and all of these things going on. And they're like, well, but what if you were healthy until you were 100 years old? People just assume that these diseases are inevitable. Everyone's going to get them. Everyone's going to come down with them because it's so prone to our environment. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, there's somewhat of a choice, a personal choice, but a lot of ways, like I said, is our culture telling us to do this. It's set up culturally, and it's set up in our economic system and how things work that way. And so we can make personal choices, but we also need to be aware that certain institutions need to change the way we approach health. And so the more people who can be aware that it is a choice, that it is something that is externally put on us, the more those systems will be forced to change, hopefully. And the people who live to be 100 years old in perfectly good health. And that, I think, is the goal. When people talk about longevity, biohacking, all these things, that is the goal.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I know my fellow podcaster, Peter Attia, talks about this. He's a big voice in the field, and full respect to him. This is a worldview you're speaking about, this assumption, and it's very dangerous. In the UK, we have these triangle signs on the street, road furniture they call, to warn people of an old person. And I'm always curious, why do they think they got to walk with a stick? Now, I know some people have to. Some people get injured. Some people have health problems. My mother has health problems. So we don't want to start causing blame, but the assumption's dangerous. I have this thing around bungalow beliefs. So in our culture, we get older people to go to bungalows. And you got to ask them, well, why is that? Well, people say, well, immobility. But if someone doesn't have an immobility issue, they're just aging, give them a 3-story townhouse and they will do steps every day. If you do steps every day, you're functionally working out. And I think this is an interesting question and point around the design of our environment needs to now be conscious, because the designed environment is built to take away movement. It's built to be more comfortable. So the elevated versus the stairs, and convenient. Yeah. So convenience and comfort are actually deadly for most of us, because we just don't have enough movement unless you consciously put it in through exercise, through walking, through making a clear mandate. Like, I mean, I don't take elevators. I went to a meeting recently. Be like, are you going to come up and say, yeah, I'll see you there? And they looked at me a bit baffled. I'm like, I don't use elevators. Why would I? That's a free That's a free workout. There's 4 flights. I can just get in. But what we're talking about here is not anything other than a worldview. The worldview for me is like, well, I want to move all the time because I'm now north of 50. I know what's coming and I can have some choice over that. But the world is designed in a way that choice, we have to be conscious. So there's a very important point here. about a distinction between environment shaping, personal choice, but I think knowing the facts so we can make that choice. And to your point of about 100-year-old, just look at the blue zones. So
Oh yeah, I've started
right?
delving into that. Yeah.
Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia. These people don't, I mean, basically, if you're listening, Google the blue zones, you'll find out. Their culture, their environment is all about often movement, and there's lots of other layers to it as well. But they are living very well to 100. So there are things that we can model from these cultures, which are closer to older style living than the more modern culture. Now, let's talk about work. I coach a lot of people around business and work, and, we're very work orientated. I was reading your stats about the amount of work Americans do. It's bonkers. I mean, I knew the Japanese worked a lot, and of course, British, the British work ethic. And I've seen, I mean, my dad was a hard worker, but I used to quite, well, what does that even mean, hard worker?
Yeah, but I also think I think there's being a hard worker is good, but it depends on how hard for how long are you working. Like if you're working 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day and you're working hard those 6 hours of getting stuff done, then hard work is admirable. But if you're working hard at the sake, just in spite of your family, your kids, your health, that's when you run into a problem. And I think it's because I know in America, and maybe it sounds like in Britain as well, there is this sense of identity surrounding work, and your sense of worth is tied into your success, to how much you work. And that's really backwards. And that was one of the things that personally was out of whack with me because I was successful academically and athletically, but I didn't feel like I was worthy unless I was accomplishing something, unless I was successful, unless I was doing things. I didn't take worth from myself as a human being. I connected my identity with my accomplishments and achievements. And that's the quickest way to burn out and be depressed, I can tell you. And so this chapter on work really resonated with me too, because when I was in grad school, I worked 80 hours a week. You'd be like, oh, I was in the lab at 2:30 last night. Well, I didn't even go to sleep last night. That was like badges of honor, hurting our bodies and shortening our lifespans for people brag about that. But again, I think it's a cultural thing, but I also think, so it's also people's individual choices. But we've been trained, like people don't take their vacation. People don't take lunch breaks. People work 10 hours a day as a choice, but it's also conditioned into us. You saw the stats about how the US doesn't mandate any sort of paid leave and nor maternity leave. Some of those statistics are like, what is going on? It's not these policies are not supportive of health. They're not supportive of family. And so I really feel like, yes, it is a personal choice. But again, like we were talking about, it's kind of imposed on us from the outside. And in order to change the outside, people have to start changing on the inside. And like it needs to, be a grassroots kind of thing that trickles up into the workplace. The places that do offer 4-day work weeks and a lot more, leave and benefits and things for workers, those companies, there are research, those companies are very successful. They have less turnover. People are proud to work there. And so there's more and more data now, less is better. It's, for intensity of work, for quality of work, for happiness, for work-life balance. Less work is always better.
Yeah, so it's such an interesting point, isn't it? It's the quality of work is such a key thing, because if you're like, oh, I'm a hard worker, and I know in the medical field, medical guys work really, really hard. Some people, push these hours, but I coached a guy once, and he used to brag about being able to do all-nighters and this, that, and the other. And I said to him, well, that's great. How's your life working for you? And his life wasn't working because we were in a coaching, because he was in a dilemma where he was stuck. And what was interesting is the reason why he was working needed to be looked at more than the output. So the expression of I'm, pulling all nighters, I can do this, was the expression of a deeper drive. And you hit something really powerful here. this drive to prove or to be or to succeed, it's this status drive that humans have. It's natural. We all have it to some degree, but it seems to have come really to the forefront in modern culture, particularly in the domain of work and success, that our identity gets hung. The I am statement doesn't have as much value until we get, I am a doctor, I am a PhD in immunology, I am a, psychologist, whatever it is. Because without that, we can feel a bit psychologically naked. And if we're not okay with that because we don't want to be only a human, then we've got some problems here. And I think this is, once again, back to your question about on the origin of things. Like, what are we at our core? And, people talk about nature as this thing, don't they? Like, well, the trees are out there and we've got to fix the environment. And there's some truth to that. There's some fixing to be done. But actually, the misunderstanding is we are nature. We are, of you said, those eukaryote cells, we are the same origin, we're the same thing on some level. And there's a lot of debate whether it's the left brain part and the right brain part, but how humans have schismed away from understanding the environment and us are intertwined. Whether we like it or agree with it or deny it, doesn't matter, because you can't get off the earth, nowhere else to go. One place. And it's one system. And the problem that we have about seeing separateness, which again is a very human thing, is that we think we'll be okay. Like, don't worry about the forest, be all right. It's like, no, because when the ecosystem is destroyed, then so all the plant systems, and we don't have any food and we all die. So this is narrative, which of course guys have been banging on about for years. It's getting more powerful. But I think when we see ourselves as nature, there's this acceptance, or I trust there's acceptance. It's something I've had to do, to really understand my own choices in life and what I do, because the choices we make impact everything around us, including everyone around us. So if we connect, like, well, I'm same as my neighbor and same as my, the tree, and there's a connection between us. What do I do about that? It's a different thing, because the separateness can create a division, and the division can create a them and us, which I think is an interesting point around why people work so hard. Because if it's about status, it's a concept.
It is. And I think because it's around status and what we have, what we do and what we have are define who we are. So that totally plays into consumerism and just this endless consumption that we have, because we have to have, this status of owning things, of having a big house, and then once we have a big house, we got to fill it with stuff. Oh, we need more stuff because we've been taught that stuff provides us happiness, not experiences, not connection. And so then we have to buy storage units to store all this stuff, where, more of a minimalist attitude towards things. Like, does somebody need to buy, I don't know, an outfit a week? Can't you rewear stuff? I mean, looking at red carpets, like, oh my gosh, this so-and-so star was re-wearing something that they wore 5 years ago. How dare they, And so I feel like, on hunter-gatherers, whatever they could carry on their backs and move around, that's what they brought with them. And, a farmer, an early farmer, once you had more possessions than an entire group of hunter-gatherers. So this obsession with stuff, it's not like we had this drive to have all of this stuff and our stuff be tied to our identity. It's not a human thing. It's become a human thing, but what's really cool is, we've talked about this before, but because we're so intelligent and our brains are big and we're creative and we have plasticity, we are capable of doing some amazing, amazing things, but we don't necessarily think about what's the consequence of these things, right? Sometimes I feel like our intelligence and our creativity and all these things that we're making is too much of a good thing, because we're accelerating the change to our environment while not taking into account anything that's going on inside our bodies. So, we did not evolve to work 80 hours a week. We evolved to work to meet our needs. And once our needs were met, and they were very, very simple needs, once our needs were met, we rested, we danced, we, Luke likes to say, we partied, we moved our bodies, we We visited with friends. We were creative, like making things with our hands. And so, and you can say that about so many other aspects of our life that, we're trying to make our lives better and more convenient and easier to live, but we overshot. We've really overshot.
I'm going to say we should, again, it comes back to this for what reason? Someone's just like, yeah, I've got to get this ready meal because it's quick. I'm like, why? What are you going to do? Like, watch some more TV or something? Like, what? I don't get it. So, but there is this thing around, well, and there's some suggestions around the brain is configured in a way that it finds the easiest route to do with limbic brain schemas and how the brain does memory schemas. But we have to, I think this is the issue, right? If we're so damn clever, we now need to be conscious and intelligent to say, we've designed culture in a certain way. We're now at a point of evolution where we can connect globally, like we're doing right now. We can speak to great minds, and those great minds can elevate things because there is, of course, a short-sightedness to our way of being. We're just about to come for an election here. This podcast's probably gone out and it's probably already happened, but it's a 4-year cycle. 4 years isn't long. It just isn't long at all. But to us, it seems such a long time. And as you've alluded to, like the 10, 12,000 years ago when we went to the agricultural system, that seems a long time ago. But evolutionary, from what you guys are saying, your research, it's like that's a blink of an eye in the evolutionary domain. So Jenny, when your research, I've read lots of it, that 10,000 or so years ago, agriculture, which is a blink of an eye, but way before that, hunter-gatherers. Is it 70,000 years ago, you were saying that there was a big shift in like how the brain was working for humans. So this last 200 years where so much has changed from the industrial to the technological, like what's the fit between your research in the whole origin piece to what we're talking about now, about how we're making decisions and choices individually and as a species?
Well, I think what's really interesting is what I learned about how our ancestors and how a lot of indigenous and others who have survived into modernity, how they view time. And this is why I think in all cases, another thread that comes through our book is learning to live more in the present. Because what our ancestors did is their survival depended on their awareness of the present moment, right? They had to know when, if there was a predator, or they had to know, there's our prey. We need to hunt. They needed to know when it was going to rain. They needed to know when they needed to sleep. And so they were very attuned to their bodies and they were very attuned to their environment. They had a more circular view of time. Some anthropologists coined the term immediate return economy. So whatever they harvested or hunted that day was eaten. If they had extra, they'd share it. It wasn't like, there's some groups stored food out of necessity, but a lot of the groups just whatever they needed, they got it and they ate it. It was an immediate return. And then as soon as the agricultural revolution happened, now we have this delayed return economy, more future oriented. So now, we plant the seeds and in 6 months we harvest. And so we're always worried about, okay, what's going to happen? I need to do this. I need to do that. We're always thinking ahead. We're not thinking, okay, what does this plant need right now? So that way of thinking about our economy and how things work, and now we work and then we get a paycheck a month later. And so we have this very future-oriented economy, and that's changing how we think about the world. And so we're never in the present moment. We're always in the future. We're always thinking about the past. And talk about a blink of an eye. If you're not in the present moment, it's like time goes by so much faster because you're unconscious when, the only place that is real and is actually happening is this present moment. So I really do feel like, and now we view time very linear. It's very step-by-step linear. And so we don't have a lot of these like circular, spiritual, and we're all connected and, those kinds of things that have really just changed our outlook on life. So another, being in the present moment, not only does it help you be more efficient at work, be happier, have less anxiety and stress. But it actually makes like your life feel like it's moving slower, like you can enjoy every single moment of it. So I feel like that is something that we really need to shift. And I do see a shift in a lot of people are practicing meditation and mindfulness, and that's wonderful. I'm really glad it's really catching on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I thankfully studied mindfulness. I've been in yoga for years. A lot of the Eastern traditions have a different view. So our Western tradition, think of Maslow, is a very individualist. They'll depict it with a triangle. Look at Eastern symbolism. A lot of it's done with circles and concentric waves. So they're both worldviews. So I think what we want to look at is where's the evidence around us, and it sounds like that's what you guys are looking at. There's the evidence around us that times are systems, and actually circadian rhythms and cycles and systems are the same thing. They have this rhythm and a circular nature to them. And hey, we're on a kind of spherical planet, right? So there's a connection here. But our Western mind, or let's say more current mind, is a very linear mind, and the future is somewhere. So for some people it's forward, some people it's that way, but it's we're going one way. And I remember Alan Watts, who was a great philosopher back in the 50s, and he used to speak a lot in America. He had a big connection in America, and he used to talk about this a lot. And none of this is new, but this ability to be here now. There are no problems here now, and if there are, you can deal with them. But the way our brains predicated are on threat perception, that most of our brain is focused towards survival and avoiding threats as it is to feeling fulfilled. But the threats in the potential future are the ones that cause us anxiety. And the biggest anxiety is what we're thinking about what might happen and the gap between. So you can only solve a problem in the moment. And yes, you can avoid it. If you see a car coming towards you, you don't need to think, you should get out of the way. So yes, there are practical reasons, but most of our threats today are psychological and social. How will I look on said red carpet if I wear my dress? How will I be viewed if I only earn 100 grand a year, not 150 like my neighbor earns, or whatever the things are? So we get into this comparative nature. There's one thing that struck me. I was in conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about these similar themes. And we're interested in the royal family. We have the royals here in the UK. It's all very lovely. But the royals were basically the top of the pile, like the transnational global companies now are the top of the pile. And I wonder about this home ownership thing and land ownership. And it sounds like it comes from agriculture, but it feels like in the modern world, we have, I'm going to call it kingism. The idea we can all be a king or queen of our house, our flat, our garden, whatever it is. And we can own stuff like the kings did. Because not that many years ago, like middle centuries, 1500s, most people were peasants and, farm workers and stuff and that. And then there's the royals. It was quite a distinct thing. Now we've all got a bit of king possibility going on around. We could be like them. It's an idea I like to play with about, is that what's driving us? The idea that we could actually be this evolved self, this idea of self. But there's a price, right? There's a price. Well, that's all very well. But if we are moving away from happiness, health, family, love, connection, it's going to be an empty promise.
It is, because those things, we did not evolve in a way where we move through the world as individuals. We did not evolve a way like, oh, I can take care of this myself. We evolved in group settings where, the success and survival of the group was of utmost importance. And in order for the group to survive, the individuals had to take care of each other. Because if they didn't, they didn't take care of each other, things wouldn't get done. They wouldn't have the resources they needed. And so I feel like that kingism, queenism, being the ruler, being at the top, I think it appeals to people because it feels secure, but it's secure in a modern money kind of way, not secure in a health, spiritual, community kind of way. And this individualism, everyone takes so much pride in, like, I don't need help and I don't do this, but you said there is a cost. There's a cost to try to do it alone, because that's not how we evolved. We did not evolve to exist in this planet alone. And it shows because, there's all of these studies, especially during and after COVID, how loneliness is an epidemic and how it is just really affecting the psyche of whole groups of people just being lonely.
Yeah, so it's such a valid point. I think the WHO, World Health Organization, pre-COVID had put loneliness as the next big epidemic of health crisis, as like the top of the pile, way above smoking and these sorts of things. So, and then it calls back to once again, like to your research, like, well, if we're not designed to be atomized and separate and individual and them and us, and we are supposed to be we, the we community, then how do we get back to it? And that's the question, right? That's like, how do we get back to that? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's we can't go back. We're not going to go back and be hunter gatherer bands again. But we can take what we can cultivate and develop a community around ourselves. It could be friends, it could be neighbors, it could be extended family, but just make it a priority. It needs to be a priority. People need to learn to ask for help. They need to learn to receive help because I think people in general, if someone asks for help, they'll jump right in it and help because there's this generosity. I think there's this deep generosity in humans. When there's tragedies that happen all over the world, people are like, what can we do? What can we do? But that's more like as a global, kind of as a big thing. We need to have those kinds of thoughts of generosity and giving of ourselves, receiving into ourselves. We need to have that same kind of, what can I do? What do you need? I'm here to help. And so I think individually we can make this huge world feel much smaller by gathering our people around us and making it a priority to be with them and to talk about deep things and to go out into nature and to like share your food to this is the first of the series of books because the overarching idea was to look at 10 different ways of being. So these are kind of the basic ways of being. But in the next book, it'll be more about our social needs, the sexes, social groups, raising children, those kinds of things. And then in the last book, we're talking about more cultural needs, the arts, celebration, religion, those kinds of things. Because it's not just like being with somebody. You need somebody there to celebrate with. You need somebody there to help you survive, to have your back. So it's all connected. All of those ways of being are connected.
Absolutely. Just like the human body is an organism made of multiple organisms, like every organ does not work as a sum of the parts. So, liver has its own life, but it works as part of the human body system. So we're all parts of systems. It seems to be our worldview, our brilliant mind has become quite detached and seen as a separateness. But I've never met anyone without a body, whether there's been a disability or something like that. No one can function without the body. And whatever some clever person thinks they can download you onto a hard drive, you can't. It's not been done. So until that happens, then it's just a wishful thought by someone who can't handle reality, in my experience. So now, one thing you did touching on my love of philosophy is eudaimonia. Now, good old Aristotle, along with, I know the Chinese used to think about this in Neo-Confucianism, but talk about eudaimonia, which if you haven't heard of it, eudaimonia is basically the good life. So hedonic might be like the fun life and happiness. And we are a lot of predication towards, hey, be happy, certainly in modern culture. When actually be fulfilled, I'm just simplifying it, but be fulfilled would be a more richer, deeper quality. Because you can be happy, like you can watch a sports game or a great movie or eat some chocolate, whatever the thing is, it's a little peak. That's nice, but it's not sustainable. And what is sustainable is something which is deeper, fulfilling, such as a loving relationship. If you have children or have dogs or you do something impactful in your community, there's a depth to that warmth feeling, isn't there, that really resonates for a long time. And I think Aristotle was really onto something here, that is actually a good life. The eudaimonic life, if I've said that correctly, is something more empowering. And as you rightly say, back to that point, like what do we want as individuals or as a family? What do we want? know what I want. I want to be loved. I want to have fun. I want to be engaged in the world. I want to grow. I want to be connected. So can't do that on my own. It's really simple. Yeah, you need some others to do that with, and even if you have a small family, my family is a very small family, but it's still a family, still a community. I think there's something around reminding ourselves of what do we really want? What's the stuff that actually really matters? Where's their joy? As opposed to where's their, let's say, the status thing we spoke about. Because, yeah, and I've coached a lot of high net worth people and they're like, yeah, I got a lot of stuff. And there's a common theme of like, yes, but there's a lack of fulfillment there. It's like, okay, we need to go up the second mountain, as we call it. The first mountain is about success. You get to the top and go, oh, this mountain's not the one I want. I want the one over there. The one where I've got fulfillment, love, impact, sharing knowledge in the world, whatever that good stuff is. And I think if we anchor around that, there's, as you rightly say, there has to be others involved, community, others. And then there are so many factors which link back to your work and research around the hunter-gatherer tribe and the Paleolithic party. It's such a good way to be, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love part of that whole eudaimonia circle. I love the word flourishing, because evolution didn't design us to be happy. Happiness is not the end goal. Survival is the end goal. And so, but in order to get to that goal, to reproduce, to pass on your genes, you have to have this state, you have to flourish in the world. You have to have, like we talked about earlier, you have to have this dynamic state of health where you can, because life's going to throw stuff at you. No one is unaffected by the ups and downs of life. But if you're flourishing and if you're living in a way in which you have the resources, the personal resources, the community resources to get yourself back to equilibrium, that is what's going to help you survive the most. And all of the things that evolved with that, the community aspect especially, I think that we've forgotten, just like we've forgotten that we're part of nature. This is still kind of part of the same thing. We're connected to each other. And as a part of nature, we are one species who has the capability to think about things and philosophize and come up with terms like eudaimonia and things like that. But we've lost the cohesion of our species.
I think you make such an interesting point there. I've had a lot of fantastic masters who've trained me and taught me over the years. And there's this remembering quality, which is the antithesis of forgetting. We forget that we are of nature. And the antithesis is to remember. It's that simple. It's funny, isn't it? When we look at that word, when I love etymology, remember. We're part of a member. It's to remember ourselves. Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way.
Me neither. It just came up.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it shows you what the human mind can do. It's like in that moment, in this conversation, it just put that together. Now, that's an interesting insight, isn't it? That I didn't have any knowledge too. So it shows the emergent capabilities of human knowledge. We put us in the right mental space.
We're collaborating.
We collaborate, right? And we're in these spaces of not actually, we're talking about these challenges and we're allowing our minds to create something. So we forget, and the antithesis is to remember. And if we remember, we actually designed to be as part of groups, and of course, there's even more member part of that group, then it's natural. And if it's natural, it flows. And that's a really beautiful thing, because who wants problems? Yeah. Who wants ill health? Who wants stress? No one actually wants this stuff. So why don't we choose what we want? And that looks like, and it's deep stuff. Yeah, you might want a Lamborghini, but you say that, well, why do you want Lamborghinis? Because I want to feel cool. Why do you want to feel cool? Because I want to be accepted. So you want to be part of the group. So we follow the threads of most belief patterns. They are about acceptance, love, respect, safety. They're the common threads. They're like the stuff that brings us together. So
exactly.
We could talk for hours and hours. I just want to summarize.
Yes, we could.
It's really, really enjoyable. I've had the privilege of reading the book. We will leave details in the show notes for where you can access the book online or at a bookstore, wherever we're hearing this podcast. So we'll put all the details for you. Looking at the past, looking at how and where we come from is very telling
And not just like where we come from, a couple of 100 years ago as humans, but actually what are we made of, our constituent parts, and what are we connected to? And your work with Luke and the research, there's loads in there. It's really, really thorough. I've really enjoyed looking and reading and learning even more. It's amazing. Jenny, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listener?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just important to know the reasons why things are the way they are. I mean, we've normalized kind of some of these things of being stressed, of being unhealthy, of not being connected. But we need to, because humans have this amazing innate ability to use their creativity to change the world around them. We still have hunter-gatherer genes and hunter-gatherer software, but the amazing thing about humans is that we can change our behavior in an instant, and sometimes it might feel really overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, there's so much that we have to do. Well, it just starts with one decision, one little thing. And as these decisions start affecting your life and making you feel more like you can flourish, like you can return to equilibrium, then it's easier to take the next step and take the next step. When I was writing the book, I felt very overwhelmed at times, like, oh my gosh, we're doing this. So everything is so different and there's so many things that I can do. But if you feel overwhelmed like that, just take the easiest thing that it seems to you, like the thing that resonates with you the most. And to me, that was nature. And so spend more time in nature. And then when that starts making you feel better, like, oh, well, I feel like I can go to the store and buy some more healthy food and make myself dinner rather than go down to McDonald's for dinner tonight. So it kind of snowballs and turns into a lifestyle. You're not going to change your lifestyle like that. Just change one thing at a time.
Absolutely wise words, and small steps every day. That's an ancient principle called Kaizen from Japan, and they were like, make small progress every day because that's really doable. But small steps over time make a huge difference. Really beautifully said. I echo those thoughts. It's about start where most resonates with you, right? Start where resonates with you, because if something resonates with you, like sort your sleep out, sort your nutrition out, connect with nature, connect with friends, wherever that is probably the most salient point, start there. And then like a keystone effect, it will flourish out. But commit. It's your life, it's our life. We're all connected. So Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an
Thank you
absolute
so much,
pleasure.
Sal. I enjoyed our talk so much.
Yeah, really lovely. So dear listeners, until next time, take care. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe. And if a friend would benefit from hearing this, do send it on to them as well. If you would like to get in touch yourself, then you can go to my website, which is saljefferies.com, spelled SALJEFFERIES, saljefferies.com. Hit the Get in Touch link, and there you can send me a direct message. If you'd like to go one step further and learn whether coaching can help you overcome a challenge or a block in your life, then do reach out and I offer a call where we can discuss how this may be able to help you. Until the next time, take care.